Here we go, final round with the Xinu Discovery set. Again, these lovely packaged 5 milliliter samples with droppers. And I must admit, I cheated a little bit, saving the best for last. At Scent Bar here in New York City, I had tried before OroNardo and Monstera. And I knew they liked them, and I was trying to save a couple for the end that I knew I'd be into. We'll start with OroNardo. This, hands down, my favorite from the set. It's the big white floral, mock orange blossom, marigold, Mexican tuberose. It says yellow oleander flower. This one, it's really all about tuberose. I'm a big fan of tuberose if it's done in kind of a green way, not an overly sweet way, or not an overly powdery or old-fashioned way. I can really like tuberose. In fact, one of the first, actually the first really niche fragrance I bought was from Frederick Mall. I tested everything there over several visits and decided upon Carnal Flower because I found it was just the most outstandingly unique of the whole line. I since, unfortunately, after wearing a couple months and finding little red dots all over my hand or wrist, I thought at first I just had suffered a bunch of bug bites. It was the heat of summer. Then I realized these little red dots were everywhere where I sprayed perfume. And sure enough, it turns out that I got allergic to Carnal Flower. I've heard dermatologists speak of this before, that you can actually become allergic to something through repeated exposure that you weren't originally. And I wore it for almost a month before having any issue. And now certain fragrances with tuberose give me a similar reaction. So I'm really happy that this one did not give me any reaction, but it's surely full of tuberose. So this might end up being my replacement Carnal Flower. Compared to Carnal Flower, it's a bit less cool, although it does have a lot of greenness in the opening. It doesn't feel overly heavy. There's like a fresh, really nice, like you're just whiffing right into a flower. How you get the greenness, you get a dewiness of the petals. It's not instantly heady, heavy vanilla tuberose at all. And I really like that. That's what I love about Carnal Flower, the way it's like sticking your head in a cold flower freezer is just a wonderful effect. I think part of that is achieved by the mock orange blossom, as orange blossom and tuberose are kind of melded in the beginning to give a little bit more freshness. Like most white florals, it's a big fragrance, just a tiny drop right now. I'm smelling it really, really well. Easily lasts all day. I like the way they describe this luminous. I would say it is very luminous, opulent, golden for sure. The only knock against it is it's not massively unique. If you know a lot of white florals, you'll be familiar with this scent profile. But I think it's very well done and among the better iterations of this scent profile that I've smelled. It's very natural smelling. It does get more sweet and round towards the end, more big, white, warm floral, but it never goes too sweet for me, and I have a very kind of low tolerance for sweetness. So for me, this is a winner. Depends a lot on how you just feel about white florals, how you feel about tuberose. If I buy one from the collection, I think it would be this. But again, if you have a lot of white florals, you may not be that impressed by this. To be honest, I slightly prefer Carnal Flower still, just because I think there's probably a cocktail of musks that Ropion's really good with in the dry down of Carnal Flower that I just find really intoxicating. And this is a lovely dry down, but it's just not quite as amazing as Carnal Flower. But at least I can wear this without getting an allergic reaction. So that's OroNardo. Beautiful, green, fresh, super realistic, super natural smelling floral. Now we're gonna move on to Monstera. Another one that I thought I would love based on the notes, based on the reviews I had read. This is the big green fragrance. The description says lush, crunchy leaf, jungle, jade, and it features the Monstera fruit and leaves, white datura, and bullhorn orchid. If you read the reviews, a lot of people seem to find this the favorite, and certainly I think it's maybe the most distinctive of the brand, really smelling of like South American forest and jungle, wet and green. And the intro is really, really, really nice. Yeah, the intro, it's herbal, it's green. I imagine just big green tropical leaves, rainforest. Really unique. I think the most unique in the whole set. I can't think of anything else I've smelled like this. I suppose Synthetic Jungle would be the closest to this, but they're very different. Now the bad news. The dry down for me becomes really just a watery, pleasant, kind of thin green thing that unfortunately smells a lot like some shampoos or body wash. It's still nice, it's pleasant, but I'd say the dry down is significantly less interesting than the opening hour or so. It's still good, it's worth trying. I'd like to try it more in heat to see if I'm tempted to buy a bottle. But it just goes almost aquatic, not cologne aquatic, but just freshness. I'm thinking of like if you collected the rainwater off the big green leaves, that's the smell left over. Just a little bit of a generic wet freshness is left. In the beginning though, the greenness, there's like a pepperiness to it, a peppery leaves, like you're crushing leaves between your hands and smelling that sort of bitter herbal aspect to it. Yeah, really nice. I'm almost selling myself on it again, smelling the intro, but I remember when I gave it a full day wear, I was really let down by the dry down. To be honest, compared to Synthetic Jungle, I think I would rather wear Synthetic Jungle. But there's similarly kind of a leafy tropical green, not the kind of galbanum sharp green of, say, Chanel 19. It's not that kind of green. I think Synthetic Jungle, although very, very different, is a better comparison. It's more in that wheelhouse. So some final thoughts on the brand. Packaging, as I said, is fantastic. I love the way this looks. I love the look of the candle. Quick note about the candle. It really smells like a salad when you're burning it. It's also green, supposed to have tuberose in it, but I get a lot of like jalapeno, like the smell of chopping a fresh green jalapeno, which is nice, but I'm not sure I need my house to smell like that. But the vessel is beautiful. You can reuse it. The vessels, the bottles come in are beautiful. You can reuse them. I think it's a cool story, a brand out of Mexico City. You don't hear a lot of perfume brands coming from there. It seems like a very, local thing, tapped into local ingredients, and I love all that about the brand. I think they're all very well crafted. Obviously, Rodrigo Flores knows what he's doing. They all have good longevity. Other things I appreciate is none of them have any of the obvious overly used aroma chemicals. I have no problem with aroma chemicals. They're in everything that I like for the most part. But a lot of designer expensive releases end up kind of disappointing in that they have these smells that are quite generic in the base that remind you of a lot of other things. There's none of that here, except maybe in Aqua Madera. So for what it leaves out, I appreciate. Doesn't really go down any of the tropes that other high-end kind of niche wannabe fragrance brands do. So there's a level of taste, I guess, is another way of saying it, that I appreciate. The downside is I find they're all fairly simple, and several of them I kept thinking I wish there was just more to it. Copala I really like, maybe my second favorite, but it becomes really, really simple in the dry down. Just basically nothing but that Copala resin, and I find myself wanting more. I hate this concept, but really I think they'd be nice for layering. The reason I hate it is because for such an expensive perfume, they shouldn't feel unfinished or like they need to be combined to give yourself a finished fragrance. But I keep thinking to really get more out of these, that sometimes they'd be great layered. Like Copala, I would love to maybe beef up with the tobacco one a little bit. Probably the biggest disappointment was Aqua Madera, because I do like freshies if they're well done. I love a good cologne, but the dry down is just very generic. And I went and I read other reviews, and I'm not alone. Several people said that it smelled, some people said Dior Homme Sport, and I can see that the base just goes straight into this sport fragrance territory. So my biggest knock about the brand is for such a unique backstory, for such unique packaging, the fragrances aren't all that unique. They're not very daring, they're not very adventurous, they're fairly simple, but they're well done in the simplicity. If I was to buy one, probably it'll be OroNardo. I really like this. And it fills a hole in my wardrobe of these big white florals. I don't have a lot, although I appreciate that genre. But I can also kind of understand it's the kind of place that's a destination to visit their boutique, probably tourists, a lot of people who are visiting the city, step in the store, smell things a couple times and buy them. It's not necessarily a brand for fragrance heads. So because of that, they don't want the fragrances to be too scary, too off-putting, too complex. They're just nice fragrances. But the problem with that is they're very expensive, very, very expensive. I think $240 for 50 milliliters. To be honest, probably 225 of that is the bottle. But I like them. I think if I went to Mexico City and went to the store, it'd be a nice experience to buy the bottle. I'm tempted to buy OroNardo right now, but none of the other ones tempt me to have a full bottle at all. But the Discovery set, well worth it. I have a feeling these will last me quite a long time. It's a good amount of juice, and I like the dropper application. If it's not a spray, at least there's a little dropper, which is nice. It also feels like these could be reusable as well. So those are my final thoughts on Xinu. Let me know if you've tried these, if you have a favorite, or if I've piqued your interest in trying them as well. They can be bought from Lucky Scent in the US. Their website, though, does deliver, although international shipping's a bit expensive, but understandable. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed.